So Marjorie Taylor Greene has been all over my feed lately, and there has been a lot of discussion around her apparent shift in public politics or stance on particular issues. And while I absolutely do not want to be talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, I do think this is a great time to talk once again around accountability, forgiveness, and redemption. First off, accountability. Accountability is a relationship. You can't have accountability without relationship. This is something I've written about extensively. This is also something that others have talked about, especially abolitionists have talked about. We can't hold institutions accountable that we aren't in relationship with, and we can't hold people accountable that we aren't in relationship with. So when we talk about accountability, a lot of times we're not actually talking about accountability. We're talking about revenge, we're talking about consequence, but accountability where you are accountable to someone requires a relationship. So if you don't have that and you want accountability, building that relationship is an important part. Building that relationship is important because when you're trying to resolve conflict or heal from harm, you have to have something that you're resolving to or healing toward. And that means you have to have a relationship goal in mind. This is also because the accountability process is not just one party. It's not just the party that caused harm saying, I'm accountable and I decide to be accountable. You have to be in communication and relationship with those you harmed and all contributors to that harm in order to go through this process of trying to heal the harm, trying to prevent future harm, and trying to build something stronger from that process. Forgiveness. I have written about forgiveness over the years. Some of my earliest essays were on forgiveness and the fact that I actually think we kind of shove forgiveness down the throats of people who've been harmed. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. Forgiveness is a lovely thing if that's where you arrive naturally after being harmed. But what we see often is that people who are being harmed, especially when there is a power dynamic at play, where perhaps the person being harmed has less power than the person that harmed them, which is often the case, there's a lot of pressure to forgive the person that caused harm, mainly to protect the person that harmed or to really make the status quo that contributed to that harm much more comfortable. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. So people can apologize for harm done. People can agree to go through a process to try to repair that harm. And at the end of the day, you still actually don't owe anyone forgiveness. And it's important to know that we actually don't go through accountability or repair processes with forgiveness as the end goal. And a lot of times people do that, and that's really a self-serving way to get into this process. You go through the process because you care about the harm that you did and you want to repair it. The people that you've harmed do not owe you forgiveness. At the end of the day, the reward for that process is that you have repaired harm and you're better able to move through community. You aren't owed and people aren't obligated to forgive you no matter how well you move through that process. And it's incredibly important that we never pressure people to forgive, but especially when people actually haven't gone through any sort of repair process. Finally, let's talk redemption. I think we all love a redemption arc. We all want to know that we aren't bad people, or that one mistake won't see us cast out of society forever, that we all could be redeemed. And there is nothing wrong with that. And in fact, we do have a really deep problem with looking at the harm people create and saying that that person is defined by that harm forever and has no opportunity for growth or to re-enter community or society. And the truth is that we all commit harm to various degrees. So how does that work when I also said that people don't owe you forgiveness? Well, it works like this. You exist as a person, as a whole person. You're a collection of feelings and thoughts. You're also a collection of deeds. And to some people that you've harmed, you may forever be the person who harmed them, and that's okay. But to other people, you have an opportunity to be something else. And if we are to move toward a more abolitionist and liberatory society, we actually do have to be invested in the redemption of others. We have to be invested in the growth and healing of others. But it doesn't mean that everyone has to be invested in the growth and healing of every person, especially not those directly harmed by that person. And so, if you have done serious harm to people, your redemption arc may not and probably won't look like the person you harmed saying, you know what, in my eyes, you're a good person now. But it will look like you doing your best to understand the harm you've done, to help heal whatever you can of that harm, to address the root causes of that harm, to try to ensure that harm never happens again, and do whatever you can to aid in the healing of the person that was harmed. And through that process and addressing whatever personal healing you have to do to go through that process and whatever accountability you need with other actors in that harm, you will grow and you will be a better member of society. And your redemption may well look like knowing that personally and having better relationships with community, being better able to help instead of harm community. And that will be your redemption arc. It is not society looking at you and saying, we never talk about the harm you did again, or this didn't happen, or the people you harmed saying, I forgive you, and now you are great in my eyes. It looks like you knowing that you are unlikely to ever cause that type of harm again, and that you have found new, better, healthier ways to be in community. So let's get back to why I said I don't want to be talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not in my community and has made no efforts to be. And so I'm actually not interested in addressing whatever she is claiming right now, because I actually haven't seen any real substantive efforts for her to go through any of the real work needed to repair harm done. When she does, I might address it, I might not, because chances are she's still not going to be in my community in particular. And so when we're talking about these things, I think it's really important to understand that this messaging we send out is not just about one person. It impacts how we look at harm in our friendships, in our working relationships, and in our communities. And let's be consistent in how we talk about it.